Hey everyone, welcome back to NU Takes. My name is Michael Barthelemy.
And I'm Didi Jen, and we're ready to give our hot takes and spicy opinions about all things Northwestern sports.
So obviously, NFL draft was last week, just wrapped up on Saturday. Three Wildcats heard their name called in the NFL draft, most in single draft since 2010. Things got started with offensive tackle Rashawn Slater being the first taken at pick number 13 to the Chargers. The highest Northwestern player has been taken since 1983. Slater has been a top 10 talent by many analysts, so join Northwestern alums Justin Jackson and Joe Gaziano in LA. How do you think he'll fit in?
I think Slater is going to have a great time in LA. I think he's going to enjoy the weather probably a little bit more than Evanston. And I'm really high on this pick and this fit. I think that Slater was, arguably the best tackle in the draft. And I think he easily could have gone top 10. And I think the fact that he slid to 13 to the Chargers, was a great value pick for them. And I think he's a great fit too. I mean, the Chargers, they desperately need, someone on the left to protect Justin Herbert, the quarterback of the future. And, even though there have been, some questions raised about Slater's, smaller build for a potential tackle, I think he'd be great for them. And I think just him also being, with Northwestern alums like Justin Jackson and guys, I think that'll do a lot for him. And I think that'll make him feel right at home.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I couldn't agree more. I know it's supposed to be a debate show, but I mean, this is no debate. It's a great fit for him. And I mean, look, first off, you're right about LA. Beautiful stadium. I mean, look at that. Gorgeous. And their offense, the knock on them was their horrid offensive line. Herbert, while he put up numbers, was doing it while getting chased down the whole time. So Chargers put a ton of money into the offseason into their O-line, obviously, most notably making Corey Linsley the highest paid center ever. So with those key signings they made in the offseason, really their only hole was at left tackle, as you mentioned, and they filled that up right away with Slater. I mean, we all love Rashawn Slater. I think he's one of the most versatile offensive linemen you'll see in this draft. He brings so much to the table, and especially for the Chargers, who run a lot of zone run schemes, and Slater excels at blocking for the zone run schemes. I don't know if you'd call it a slide, but to get into the teens when he was regarded by a lot of analysts to be a top 10 talent, it's really just kind of a blessing in disguise because he's just ending up in a much better situation with the Chargers, who, I mean, they were kind of hot at the end of the year last year. That ended up getting them to the 13th pick. And they have a lot of young talent there that can propel them to success in the future. And Slater's only going to be a part of that.
Couldn't agree more. So up next was Greg Newsome, taken by the Cleveland Browns with the 26th overall pick. So bolstered by his All-American worthy junior season, Newsome sort of shot up draft boards after the end of this past college football season, resulting in him being a late first rounder. Do you think he'll live up to the hype?
Honestly, I like Greg Newsome's chances of succeeding in the NFL more than Slater's in terms of being like a super impact player. I think Slater's going to be solid no matter what, but I think Newsome has that superstar potential at corner because he's got all the attributes for it. And Cleveland, I'm not to brag, but a few weeks ago I did shout out Cleveland as a good choice for Greg Newsome. So I kind of predicted that. I'll give myself some credit. He fits perfectly in that defensive scheme. He just slots right in at that second corner spot behind Denzel Ward. And they needed the corner so bad in Cleveland because besides Denzel Ward, who is a really top corner, they have a whole bunch of nothing. And so Newsome can play on the outside, which is where he excels, and have that island where he can operate. And I think there really isn't a better fit. I really, again, like the Titans as another opportunity, but they obviously chose Caleb Farley, which, I mean, all respect to him, but I mean, dude's barely got a back. So I didn't like that pick too much on their end, but I think Newsome's going to fit like a glove here because he's another guy who's got a chip on his shoulder. Everyone from Northwestern has a chip on their shoulder. Cleveland, a team with a chip on their shoulder because they've been the laughing stock of the league for years on end. And right when they're starting to turn up, they're getting a guy, high energy, brings all the tenacity in Greg Newsome. I love it.
Yeah, I mean, again, I think you mentioned it. I think, maybe this is our Northwestern bias showing again, but I think Newsome is objectively dude's a playmaker. He showed it last year, against some of the best, wideouts in the country. Um, and I'm really surprised too that he slid, to the bottom of the first round. I think that obviously that's where a lot of mocks were projecting him to go. But I think that in terms of, his flaws, it's really just potential durability concerns. And even then, it's just been minor injuries that have sort of hampered Newsome during his 3 years in Northwestern. But outside of that, I think that, both on and off the field, what he brings to the table, like you said, it's really unmatched. He has that kind of high level energy that a lot of the top corners in the league have. He has the skill set. He's long, he's explosive, he's fast. He plays with that kind of tenacity, that kind of grit that, corners need to succeed in the league. And I see him again, like you said, I really see him. He could be a star. I think that this year he'll slot in, like you said, right there at the second corner spot for a Browns secondary and a Browns defense really that could really be one of the best in the NFL this year. And I think the Browns just got really great value out of taking Newsome at 26.
So the last player that heard their name called was on Saturday when Earnest Brown IV in the 5th round, 174th overall pick, got his name called by the Los Angeles Rams. He was mentioned in a few mock drafts, but nothing was solidified. As we discussed last week, it was a bit of a toss-up as if he was to be taken or not. So do you see a successful future in LA for Brown?
I mean, Brown is definitely an interesting pick. As we talked about last week, I think that, I wasn't really too high on him. I didn't think he was going to get drafted, frankly. I think that, given his size and his senior season when he had those 8.5 tackles for loss, which is nothing to scoff at. I think he looks like he poses a lot of upside, but at the same time, I think that he's had 4 years at Northwestern. I know he hasn't been completely healthy for them, and I just haven't seen that much growth from him, and I don't really see him taking that next step, to make it at the next level. It also hurts him. I think that he's something of a tweener. He's a little bit too big to play linebacker, a little too slow for that position, but at the same time, he's a little bit too small to play the D line. That doesn't mean to say I don't think that Brown has a chance at succeeding in NFL. In the NFL, obviously the Rams took him in the 5th round for a reason. But I think that at his peak, really just play a key rotational role on a solid defense.
Yeah, for me, I mean, I think I talked myself a little more into justifying Brown being drafted just because those 8.5 tackles for loss are tremendous. And in the lone year where he was a starter, consistent starter for Northwestern, he was a pretty good run stopper. Not great in pass pursuit, but I think the Rams more want him to be like a run stopper. I mean, they had a tremendous run defense last year, only gave up 3.8 yards allowed per attempt, the Rams did. And they have obviously like one of the best players in the league, one of the best defensive linemen of all time, and Aaron Donald lining up right next to him. But they lost Michael Brockers to the Lions and didn't really find a good replacement. They got a guy, I think his name is Michael Hokie. I might be wrong about that. I think he came over from Canada. Some kind of random guy. I don't know. They're taking a waiver on him, and they got Brown and kind of stuck him right behind and said, well, if he's not going to be able to do it, you better be able to do it. So, I mean, Brown's going to be in a big spot here, especially for being a 5th round pick. Like, he might end up playing a lot of snaps for the Rams, which that's going to be a team competing for the AFC West. And I'm really happy for the guy, obviously. I mean, the little mishap he had on the call was kind of funny as well. But I do agree. I don't know if he's going to have a ton of success just because of the size issues and the fact that throughout his 4 years, as you mentioned, he was not putting up crazy numbers. Last year, he had some pretty good stats for run defense, but beyond that, like there wasn't anything that just stood out to me to say this guy would be a solid NFL talent. Maybe he could be able to rotate in and out, as you mentioned, but I don't really see him becoming much more than that, unfortunately.
We also saw a lot of Northwestern sign as undrafted free agents with NFL teams after the draft, among those J.R. Pace, Peyton Ramsey, Paddy Fisher, and, a lot more. Of everyone that went undrafted, who do you think is the best fit with the team they signed for, and who do you see having the best chance of making that 53-man roster?
I mean, this is the easiest choice to make, but I'm going to make it just because I'm first off speaking. Paddy Fisher in Carolina is a tremendous fit for the guy because Paddy Fisher was another guy who we thought might be able to get his name called on Saturday, might not. He ended up not. There's a lot of good linebackers in this year's draft, but the Panthers have a subpar linebacking crew, and they didn't really do much to improve it this offseason. They signed Denzel Perryman from the Chargers to be that middle linebacker for them, but he's not. So he's no stud. Like, and beyond him, Paddy Fisher on their depth chart is their number 2 middle linebacker because they didn't draft anyone, they didn't really sign anyone, and for a Panthers team that it had a really bad defense, horrible defense last year, and projects to have just a little bit better of a defense this year, it's still going to be bad. And Paddy Fisher is going to be able to get the reps that he's going to be able to get a lot of reps to show if he's an NFL talent or not. I think he fits well into a well-coached team in Matt Rule, who's going to be able to get the most out of him, I think. And he's going to make up for his lack of speed, lack of athleticism, some may say, with his smarts and how well he knows the game. And I think he'll be able to exemplify that very well in Carolina, where he's going to have, as I mentioned, a lot of opportunity to play and a lot of opportunity to show what he's got.
Yeah, I mean, it is the easy answer, but Paddy Fisher really is. I think the choice here. A lot of people forget that, after his All-American season as a sophomore, a lot of people were talking about Paddy Fisher as a first-round talent. Obviously, I think that when people kind of, saw him play a little bit more, looked at the tape a little bit more, I think even then, after his junior year, he was still being talked about as a 3rd or 4th round talent. And for him to go undrafted, I think that's got to, hurt him a little bit. And I think he's going to go to Carolina with a chip on his shoulder. And like you said, it's an opportunity. He's going to have a perfect opportunity to get to show the Panthers, whether or not he can overcome maybe some of his lack of athleticism on the field, in a real NFL setting. I think that this really is like a key moment for Fisher. I think that if he can't make the roster this year, I think it's going to be tough for him to find, any sort of NFL success in the future. But I think that, just given his pedigree and his tape, I think that he's got the talent to succeed at the next level, even if, the numbers that he put up at his pro day didn't really back that up.
Mm-hmm. Is there anyone that you were surprised to see get signed once Saturday wrapped up?
Yeah, I mean, I think that we all expected to see Paddy Fisher, but one name that kind of stuck out for me was Gunnar Vogel. That's a guy that he started all games, as a senior for the Northwestern this year. But to be honest, even during the season, his name wasn't something that really came up. He's a solid offensive lineman in the Big Ten, which is no easy feat. But at the same time, I just had no idea that, he was kind of even on NFL teams' radars. I think that, his durability, again, he started every game this past season, and his size at 6'6", 310 pounds, obviously, bodes well for his potential future. And, who knows? I think he could potentially end up like someone like Blake Hance, an undrafted free agent who bounced from roster to roster before, having his moment in the NFL playoffs with the Browns. We'll see.
Mm-hmm.
What about you?
Yeah, I mean, I think there were quite a few names where one Saturday wrapped up and undrafted free agents were getting signed left and right. I was kind of like, whoa, I did not know they were getting any sort of buzz. Guys like Gunnar Vogel, Riley Lease, and I was most surprised by was John Raine, who got signed to the Falcons. And yes, he was a cool little security blanket for Peyton Ramsey, and he was always kind of there out on the flat to catch some balls and be a pretty good blocker. But he didn't really shock me throughout the year. He wasn't anyone that teams would fear. I don't think. He was just a good receiver to have, a good tight end to have, and his pro day results were far from impressive. I mean, he ran like a 5-second 40, and the Falcons are already quite deep at tight end. I mean, they drafted Kyle Pitts 4th overall. They have Hayden Hurst, who sure they didn't pick up his 5th-year option today, but he was still quite good for them last year. So Raine, I don't think has a great opportunity of like having any sort of impact on the team, but seeing him there, I mean, we're going to get into it later, is just a matter of teams are respecting Northwestern's program and respecting the players that are coming out of Northwestern's program to be able to take waivers on guys like Raine, who weren't all that weren't all that outstanding in college.
Yeah, I mean, so kind of along that thread, having this many players drafted and signing with teams after the draft has kind of historically been unheard of for the Cats. What do you think this might say about the state of Northwestern football, and what kind of impact do you think this will have on its future?
Well, this draft was program defining, honestly, too. This whole year has been really, but it's to see the amount of respect that the league has for Northwestern players. Yes, the 2 first-round picks is historical, obviously, and it's tremendous and it's amazing, but it's honestly equally as impressive to have 10 total players signed to NFL teams. Because it's a lot of guys like John Raine, Peyton Ramsey, Riley Lease, Gunnar Vogel, who in a lot of different programs, if they're on a losing team, they probably want to get the same opportunity because they were on a losing team. They didn't get as many eyes on them. But Northwestern having a top 10 team, being in the Big Ten championship, putting up a fight in the Big Ten championship, and just overall having success at being a top 10 program, they got a ton of eyes on them. Everyone's looking at Northwestern saying like, "Ooh, what's Pat Fitzgerald building over here?" And they want to, and everyone loves Pat Fitzgerald in the NFL. I mean, teams want him as their head coach left and right. But I think it is incredibly impressive to see Northwestern have 10 players signed, guys that you wouldn't think would get signed if they were on, let's say, like South Florida. Those guys wouldn't even have their names even close to being heard of. But because they're on Northwestern and this program is climbing, it's ascending team, it's amazing to see that teams have faith in what's being built in Evanston.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, it's great to see that, it seems like the NFL is finally developing that kind of respect for Northwestern players who I feel like typically have had to, really work to even, get a chance in the league. But I think what's even more important, obviously, yes, Pat Fitzgerald's program has been ascending, but I think that, these next couple of years are really going to be program defining. I think that, obviously making the Big Ten the Big Ten championship in 2018 was huge, but having that down year in 2019, I think hurt the Cats a lot. I think it hurt them in terms of when analysts and people were talking about them last year. And I think that they're really going to need to continue the level of success that they had this year. If, Northwestern wants to keep on sending players to the NFL on a consistent basis. Obviously it's not going to be every year that, the Cats are going to get 2 first rounders. But I think that, if Pat Fitzgerald, this is where Pat Fitzgerald really needs to show that, Northwestern made the right move, signing him to a 10-year contract. I think that this year is going to be really key in just the next few years going forward, where, Northwestern really can't afford to make that many mistakes. They can't afford to go, 3-9 in the Big Ten and finish at the bottom of the standings, because I think otherwise that'll just sort of, drop Northwestern back down to, they just had 1 or 2 good fluky seasons, but in reality, they're not cut out for the top. So, I'm excited, but I'm also, holding my expectations back a little bit.
Yeah, I mean that's a great point. Next year is pivotal because the one, I guess, downside to having this many players taken is your 10 really best players, or 10 of your best players, are now gone. So you got to find a way to replace them, and especially for a guy like Newsome, and they didn't have Slater last year, obviously, but for guys like Newsome, Brown, Paddy Fisher, Blake Gallagher, to replace those guys is going to be really tough. And it's if a program can replace those guys kind of seamlessly, that's the makings of a successful team year in and year out, and the makings of a college football powerhouse. So it's exciting to see what Northwestern will be able to do next year.
Yeah, couldn't agree more.
Mm-hmm. Well, with the draft, impressive draft for the Cats, obviously, we couldn't have hope for more. From NU Takes, I'm Michael Barthelemy.
And I'm Didi.
We'll see you all next week.